Hey everybody, welcome to the I Heart Pluto Science Speakers Series with the theme of Worlds Revealed. Thanks for joining us as we celebrate the 92nd anniversary of the discovery of Pluto, which happened back in 1930. As part of this speakers series, we will have one speaker each night exploring this theme of Worlds Revealed in different ways. So I invite you to come back and join us each night from tonight through February 21st. The only exception will be Friday, the 18th, which is Pluto Discovery Day, when we'll have a panel discussion entitled A Night of Discovery at the Orpheum Theater here in Flagstaff, Arizona. Tonight's talk sponsor is Mother Road. My name is Amanda Bosch. I am a planetary scientist here at Lowell Observatory, as well as the COO. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dan Durda, an artist and planetary scientist from the Southwest Research Institute. Dan is a fellow and a former member of the board of directors of the International Association of Astronomical Artists. His artwork has appeared in hundreds of magazine articles, books, and web news stories, and his animations have been featured in television documentaries on PBS and the Science Channel. He appears regularly on the Science Channel series, How the Universe Works, and he was the 2015 recipient of the American Astronomical Society's Division for Planetary Sciences Carl Sagan Medal for Excellence in Public Communication in Planetary Science. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dan and to hand it over to him to tell us about how he imagined Pluto before the flyby. So take it away, Dan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate being here. It's my pleasure to be here to help kick off the 2022 version of I Heart Pluto. Great to be here, actually physically here at Lowell Observatory on site, just sequestered away a little bit, but great to be here. We had a great opening reception tonight, and invite anybody else here local viewing to stop by during the week and participate. It's a great venue. I did want to spend a little time tonight to talk about the sort of the history of the genre of astronomical art and the role that it plays in exploration, and a little bit about my my minor role in participating in this great venture. It's a lot of fun. Let me see if I can share my screen here and let my presentation come up. And hopefully we're seeing that online. And indeed, as I said, I want to talk a little bit here about what it was like to try to imagine Pluto before the actual flyby. Before I do that, though, I want to kind of get into a little bit of the history of the genre of astronomical art. Because I think it helps illustrate this beautiful synergy that art and exploration and art and science really play together. Space art really seeks to inspire us, to really make visible and make real things that we just ordinarily can't experience, places we can't go. We don't have time machines, at least yet, so times that we can't experience. And that's what space art helps us to actually do, to help envision the concepts and the worlds that we're interested in exploring and, in fact, exploring. The sort of, you're kind of stepping back in time, a lot of the modern Western concepts of things like perspective and the appearance of the suggestion of things that aren't actually, in the image, but only suggested, and light and shadow. A lot of these things were discovered by the ancient Greeks, but then a lot of this material, unfortunately, was lost either by, purposely by torch or not purposely by neglect with the fall of Rome. And it wasn't until the dawn of the Renaissance that a lot of these concepts were rediscovered. And really, I think the work of Giotto really personifies, I think, this reawakening of the reintroduction of a lot of these concepts in art. This particular piece, I was privileged to actually see in person this beautiful fresco in Padua, Italy. And I like this one a lot. It's 1301. It wasn't done in 1301, but the if you look carefully there, just above the manger, is a representation of a comet, and it's thought that it was the 1301 apparition of Halley's comet that was actually that he was capturing in this particular image. But again, this is the dawn of the beginning of the reintroduction of a lot of these details that we normally take for granted today, I think, in artwork.
We have a question, if I could just...
Oh, already? Sure, go ahead, jump in. Let's do that as we go along, because I think it'll make it a lot easier to just make a conversation out of it.
Glenn Frank asks, do you think that scientific space art could be considered, in quotes, hard science fiction?
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, maybe without the fiction part, I suppose, but of course that's what makes hard science fiction science, right? Is a lot of that the details and the known facts go into it. Yeah, I think so in a lot of ways.
Okay, great. And we have another question from Cody. Did you start creating astronomical art after you became a scientist or before?
Oh, nobody's ever asked that question before. That's a great one. I was dancing around with artwork even when I was a little kid. Before I was a professional scientist, but still interested in all things science. But of course, interested in all things at that point. My sister did a lot of artwork. My older sister, and I think it was her influence that led me to little pencil sketches and a few things like that. But my foray into astronomical art for real started long after I was already working scientist. It happened when I moved to Tucson, Arizona for my postdoc work, and walked into Kim Poor's Nova Space Gallery for the first time and saw other people's amazing original artwork, and was just drawn to wonder if I could do that myself. And that was the beginning of it all.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. So please continue.
Yeah, sure. Back to the journey here. This piece I like a lot. This is the Battle of Alexander at Issus. This is done in 1529. It's a spectacular painting, I think, that really captures this sense of the connection between the heavens and the earth, the grandeur that is both. This battle that's going on is captured in a way that illustrates the grandeur of what's going on here on the earth, but from a perspective that makes it seem so tiny in comparison to the heavens above. But what's also amazing in this image, 1529, is the first known image that shows the curvature of the Earth's horizon relative to everything else. That's, I think, a big step in the genre. 1711, Donato Creti was commissioned by a wealthy benefactor who really thought that the Vatican ought to be involved in astronomical research. And this person was really wanting to pitch the idea to the Pope that the Vatican ought to have an observatory. And so Creti was commissioned to do a series of paintings of what the planets looked like through telescopes. And so here is a beautiful representation of two people. This is kind of a fantastical representation, really, of two people out in the evening, twilight sky, looking, or at least observing with scientific instruments of the time, but a much exaggerated Jupiter in the sky, looking very much the way Jupiter looks in a optical telescopic view. And so it's the first known painting set of paintings to incorporate the other planets as we see them in the telescopes. By the 1800s, the exploration of the North American, the western portions of the North American continent were complete enough that people back east were really getting inspired and excited by these tales of these amazing grand vistas out west. And artists flocked out there with their easels and their canvases and their paintbrushes to start to capture rather at times fantastical images of these amazing landscapes out there. I think you have to remember that at the time you've got a lot of overworked and reworked crowded landscapes from Western Europe and so on, and this almost fantastical Eden-like landscapes of the American West were open territory. And the Hudson River School, the artists Cole and Church and Bierstadt, I think really personify this this era that for us as space artists, I think we really resonate with this idea that art and exploration go hand in hand. The exploration of the West was inspiring artists, and at the same time, the works that they were generating from that exploration, viewed back east, were inspiring other people to go and explore out west. So it was this really beautiful synergy of art and exploration working hand in hand. And I think, from here, I'll move on to more astronomical art itself rather than the history of the genre. But I think this really, the Hudson River School for us really personifies this this beautiful connection. And I'll say right up here, we'll talk about it more in a little bit, but I hope I think I really rebel against this sort of artificial distinction between art and science, the right brain and the left brain. I think it's a very artificial distinction, and I science is a very creative human endeavor, as is artwork, and I think they really shouldn't be viewed as separate things. So I just wanted to make that point there with the Hudson River School particularly. I'm looking at Frank's comment here, showing Jupiter. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, it was Frank is asking that he liked the Creti painting showing Jupiter with the moons in the sky, looking at it through the telescope, just pretty much like what you see through the telescope. That was a series of paintings that really illustrated all of the planets that way, of course, except Neptune at the time, which hadn't been discovered yet at the time of that series of paintings. But it was a great series. Another artist at the time, we're into the 1800s now, illustrating a lot of Jules Verne's works. In this particular case, is Philippito, with this, I think in many ways can be considered some of the first astronomical art in the modern sense of taking us to a place that we can't see even through a telescope. In this particular case, what you're looking at here is his representation of what the shadow of the planet Saturn might look like projected across its rings as you're riding along on this comet that's passing over Saturn's North Pole. And I think that really represents what we as modern space artists do a lot, is take us to places that we ordinarily wouldn't be able to see. Another master, the first true master was Lucien Rudeau. He was a very keen telescopic observer, and it really shows in his artwork. And I wanted to kind of really compare and contrast here Rudeau's 1937 Saturn image at the top with a Cassini spacecraft image of Saturn at the bottom. And I think Rudeau captured very beautifully the subtlety of those beautiful butterscotch, colors of bands through the atmosphere of Saturn. You can see the shadow of some moons there in the atmosphere. But I really want to draw, he was such a keen observer, I really want to draw your attention to the rings themselves and these little dark spoke-like features out there in the rings that we didn't see until the Voyager encounters with Saturn in 1980, 1981. This is 1937. I don't think that what he was representing here was in his imagination. We know that some things that people are putting down were more wishful thinking than anything, but I don't know that there was any optical effect in the telescope he was using or any suggestion that might make him want to imagine seeing these dark spoke-like features. I think he may have actually been such a keen observer that this might have been the first, well before the official discovery by Voyager of the spokes in the rings of Saturn. I think it's pretty amazing. In 1944, the grandfather of modern astronomical art, Chesley Bonestell, represented Saturn as viewed from Titan. And this is the first of the images I want to draw attention to of the role that our growing scientific knowledge during the telescopic age of planetary astronomy, the role that our scientific knowledge was starting to play in our evolving views of what the worlds might look like. At this time, the atmosphere of Titan had been detected and discovered, the first known atmosphere of a moon of a planet. And by then, we already knew that spectroscopically, it was actually methane in the atmosphere. And so Chesley was illustrating here the idea that the sky wouldn't be pitch black like the view from our own moon, say, a airless world. You'd actually have, in this particular case, he was imagining the blue rally scattered light of a Earth-like atmosphere. This, of course, is, I think this is a great marker of a historic marker of what our understanding of the science at the time was. Today, we know that we probably would not see Saturn in the sky like this, or at least quite as clearly. We know that the atmosphere of Titan, though, of course, truly methane and nitrogen rich, is also completely clouded and smogged with tons of organic molecules. The sunlight, ultraviolet light from the sun interacting with with the methane in the atmosphere and other molecules to form a photochemical smog far worse than anything you could find in the worst of days out west. So our views have changed, and this is a great marker in history of what we thought of Titan at the time. And that's what space art does for us.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry. We have a question that goes back now 2 images to the one with the spokes in the ring.
Oh yeah, spokes in the A ring, I guess in this case.
Yeah, Tom had a question about it because spokes in the A ring, because normally we think of spokes in Saturn's B ring.
Yeah, the B ring. So let me go back a little bit. Don't know. Like I said, this may be a different phenomenon. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know of any. Sitting here at Lowell with Percival's big telescope not too far behind me here, I think back to his canals on Mars and a little bit of wishful thinking, I think, at the time, and sort of your expectations coloring what you actually see. I don't think there was anything like that going on in Lucian's time with the rings of Saturn. So perhaps it was an optical effect. I don't know. Maybe it was a time variable phenomenon. Maybe there's something that was going on in the A ring different than the B ring at the time. I don't know. Can't comment on that. Don't know. This is a piece of artwork I remember from kind of harkening back to an earlier question about my influence, my beginnings in astronomical art. When I was a young child, my parents had delivered to our doorstep a whole series of Time life books, the planets, the universe, early man, the seas. And this was an image that was in the universe, which I still have that actual copy. And I was just greatly influenced by these pieces of artwork. And it's kind of fun for me now to look back at these pieces and being a member of the space art community and remembering my own early childhood influences. And this was one of the pieces that really caught my attention. Back then, I have to admit that I think my memories were more of looking at the pictures than actually reading the texts. But the pictures captured my imagination. I think that's an important point to make. Everybody at some point in their space art career does the rings of Saturn and images in the ring plane. Ludwig Pesek was a master who helped capture the concepts of the space frontier for people in Europe in much the same way that Bonistel did here in the States. But I put this piece in because it's part of the genre. We all do our ring plane image at one point or another, and this is a fantastic representation. In the space age, again, I just want to point out this role of early artistic representations driving our way forward. There was an early series in the early 1950s in Collier's magazine. It was a really interesting partnership between Walt Disney and Wernher von Braun. There was a whole series of von Braun was a consummate politician as well. He knew that you had to really sell the public on this idea of the exploration of space if we were going to actually do it, and partnered with Walt Disney to actually create this whole series of television shows that were based on the Collier series that were illustrated by Chesley Bonistel. And so there's a wonderful image here of a space plane-like shuttle with a space telescope not too far from a orbiting space station. And, doggone it, in the 1990s and 2000s, we had this. So it even though it was envisioned in the early 1950s, decades later, the art took us there in reality. And that's a very important point. And then again, feeding backwards, the being there changed our views of what the moon was actually like in this case. Pre-Apollo, Chesley Bonestell in the upper left illustrated what a trip to the moon might actually be like, with a representation of a rocket setting foot on the moon. But the lunar landscape here was illustrated in its rather alpine-esque sort of mountains, influenced by the way we saw the shadows on the terminator of the moon. The very long extended shadows at the terminator accentuated artificially the rolling, what we now know to be the rolling terrain of the moon, in a way that early artists, I think, over-exaggerated, imagined a very much more alpine-esque terrain than what actually existed. We learned after Apollo that the terrain is much more subdued. I love this little triptych of pieces. The upper left piece is by Chesley Bonestell before we ever went to the moon. The upper right piece is a piece by David Hardy, a British space artist who took our Apollo spacecraft. This is his piece entitled "The Way It Should Have Been," which was, our modern Apollo lander setting foot on the sort of Bonestellian lunar surface. Planetary scientist and space artist Bill Hartman reimagined that work in the opposite sense down below, using a more modern understanding of our known lunar landscape with a Bonestellian rocket instead. And, I have a special connection to that particular piece because I watched Bill paint that painting back in 1995 at the very first space art workshop I ever went to, where we all sort of hang out together and do these things together. So it was fun to see that little loop closed, if you will. No foray into modern astronomical and space exploration art would be complete without mentioning Bob McCall's work that graces the Smithsonian and illustrates this sort of sweeping grandeur, the hopes and the dreams and the grandeur of exploration. And his piece just captures the romance of all that so well. I want to mention here, I'll put up a screen at the very, very end, the International Association of Astronomical Artists, a group of artists that I am privileged and honored to be a part of. Born in 1981, a group of artists had spent time illustrating Carl Sagan's Cosmos. Some of these same artists came together in 1981 at Planet Fest, a celebration of the exploration of Saturn during the Voyager encounters. And some of these same artists came together and basically realized for this, for the first time, here we are together, like-minded individuals, a little cadre of people who are sharing this passion for illustrating the exploration that we're going through at the same time. And so the IAAA was born very shortly after. First workshops taking place in Hawaii, and then Death Valley, the group's growing and carrying forward into the modern era. This is 2010 at Grand Canyon here in northern Arizona, and continue to this day. And what we do is we learn from nature. We go out and we travel the world, and we go to terrains that are otherworldly, and we remind ourselves that we go to nature to remember what rocks look like. If you sit in this, as Bill Hartman has said, if you sit in the studio for too long and you paint rocks from memory, after a while they all start looking like piles of mashed potatoes. And so it's good to go out there and remind yourself what real rocks look like and what light and shadow does. And here are I just want to at the top just Betsy Smith painting at Ubi Crater at Death Valley. Bill painting at Meteor Crater here in northern Arizona. And that generates artwork that can illustrate other places. Ubi Hebi crater in the bottom here, painted by Michael Carroll, illustrating one of the volcanic vents on Jupiter's moon Io. A beautiful pencil sketch at the bottom, done in the field and plein air by Aldo Spadoni here at Meteor Crater. Just illustrating what it's like to get out there and remind ourselves that we're working from nature.
I have a comment from Glenn that touches on that connection from, things that we know and to things that we don't know yet. He says that I find it interesting that the early illustrations inspire real landings, and now some of them almost predict or inspire new ideas, like the tail landing rockets and SpaceX lander concepts.
The way God intended rockets to land, I suppose. If you a fan of sci-fi and all that from the early days, yeah, it is. It's really amazing to see it all come back full circle, and I think the sci-fi and the artwork really plays a role in inspiring people. Star Trek, right? So many people in our community grew up inspired by the world painted for us from Star Trek, and it's amazing to see so many of those concepts that have come to life. Onto Pluto, which is why we're here. I just want to go back through this same story of how the art and the science go hand in hand, and how the art of the time is reflected in what we know or knew at the time, and how what we knew at the time inspires the artwork that's done. Here's in the 1970s, James Hervot was doing a lot of illustrations for Astronomy magazine, one of which in this particular case illustrating the Pluto that we knew at the time. Ever since its discovery, Pluto was known to be a world at the icy outer edges of the solar system. Nature is far more inventive than we are. I think we ourselves were so limited in our thinking of biased toward this idea that a small world at the cryogenic limits of the solar system had to itself be a relatively boring dead world. Just a snowy dead world in the dark iciness of the outer solar system, so far from the sun that it's nothing more than a very brilliant star in the sky. And this painting, I think, from the 1970s really represents that. There's not a lot more to say about Pluto at the time in that particular sense. By the late 1970s, early 1980s, Pluto was beginning to be transformed. We discovered in 1978, James Christie finding in a very interesting image of Pluto that had a little oblong, little wobble to the side of the shape of this star-like blob, that Pluto actually has a moon, a large moon, in fact. And so our artwork is transformed yet again, beginning with new phenomena to show us. People were beginning to imagine that perhaps there may be a thin atmosphere in this icy world as we began to understand some of the chemistry of the materials that might be there, the nitrogen and the methane and the frozen carbon dioxide and so on that might be there, could be potentially liberated into an atmosphere, a thin atmosphere seasonally. And so our artworks evolved at the time. Here's some images by Mark Garlick showing various views of the shadow of Pluto's moon Charon cast across the planet, and a view of Charon itself from the world of Pluto. So we have new vistas to imagine as our scientific understanding of the world changed. David Hardy illustrating here again the two worlds together, and again the concept that there might be atmosphere there. This piece, again, shortly after the discovery of Charon itself, we're looking from Charon back at Pluto, painting that Don Dixon did in 1979. And this is rather remarkable because I'm gonna blur in here. There is Don's representation of Charon, of Pluto, and I'm going to let it slowly fade in here with a New Horizons image of Pluto superimposed. This is a view of Pluto incoming as New Horizons was approaching. I'm going to put those two up together here. Don I don't want to say by accident. I mean, because again, his work is scientifically informed, but boy, to just get it so remarkably close, decades before we actually arrived there, is just, it raises the hackles on the back of your neck to get it so stunningly correct, and, extrapolating from what we knew at the time. Just a remarkable piece, a beautiful piece, showing how close it's. You're lucky enough to get it sometimes. By the 1990s, there were concepts for, of course, we completed the grand tour of the solar system with the outer solar system with Voyager. But what was left was Pluto. What about poor Pluto out there? By this time, Alan Stern was beginning to, he actually, at the close of the Neptune encounter, actually asked the NASA administrator about, well, we've completed the tour of the big planets. What about Pluto? And the challenge came back, said, well, make it happen. And Alan, a young student at the time, took that to heart and decided to make it happen. And of course, by the early 1990s, there were many concepts for Pluto flyby spacecraft. This is a concept that Pat Rawlings put together with Alan's influence and Alan's inputs into, let's imagine what the world might actually be like. And here we're starting to see a Pluto that's a little bit more geologically interesting, inspired by our knowledge of the next best analog, I think, that we had for Pluto, which is Neptune's large moon Triton. Very much similar to Pluto in many respects, born in the same portion of the solar system. And so we see here some of Triton's geysers and albedo features, inspiring what our view of what Pluto might be like. And, Pat got it pretty close too, I think. I'm going to let our view of Pluto superimpose on there. Got the albedo features pretty darn close. I think, again, it wasn't necessarily a lucky guess. We knew by then telescopically that because of the mutual occultation events between Pluto and its moon, they were able to give us the ability to sort of map out the surface features on Pluto. And it was known already by that time that Pluto was going to be a rather geologically interesting world. So we got it pretty well. Again, another illustration or other illustrations of Pluto fast flyby concepts, this case by Mike Carroll, who by this time was imagining a rather interesting atmosphere around Pluto. And I love this. I'm not going to show you a comparison New Horizons image because I think we all remember and can imagine that beautiful departure images from New Horizons as we're leaving Pluto behind, looking back and seeing, in fact, this beautiful blue extended atmosphere around the planet. This is Mikey imagining Pluto looking just like that more than a decade before. So again, the artwork feeding back to the science and back and forth. By the early 2000s, Alan was beginning to transition into ideas for what evolved into the New Horizons mission itself. And Alan asked me to do in 2000 an image of sort of a Stanley Kubrick-esque, 2001-esque image of Pluto and Charon to help begin to get people excited about a mission concept. And this is back when I was still doing artwork the traditional way, and paintbrushes and acrylic on illustration board. And my attempts to illustrate these sort of interesting geologic features. Would Pluto have Triton-esque geysers? We don't know at the time. Would there be cloud features or hazes in the atmosphere? Impact craters on the surface? Maybe some parts of the surface that were geologically young and craterless? We don't know. Back in 2001, we didn't know. This small image, this painting that's, I don't know, something like about 16 or 18 inches wide, is still hanging in Alan's office today. It became the actual background image of the official New Horizons patch. So I had my minor influence on the New Horizons mission that way. And then around this same time, this is the challenge that Alan took up, basically. The post office had issued a series of stamps of the exploration of the planets as inspired by the spacecraft. And poor little Pluto back in 1991 was not yet explored, as the post office showed us here. Ron Miller doing a rather simple sort of illustration, a safe image, if you will, of this showing us that Pluto had not yet been explored back when stamps were only 29 cents, a long time ago in history. Well, Alan took this up as a history. Let's took this up as a challenge. Let's make sure Pluto gets explored, and really wanted to kind of put the challenge to the post office. One of these stamps, the actual stamp itself, is placed inside the New Horizons spacecraft. So Alan flew one of these stamps to Pluto itself. By 2015, we were wanting to have that stamp reissued, and I played a small role again in being able to get the stamp issued in order to excite the public and have an actual petition to excite the post office into actually issuing a stamp. We had to do a concept piece for this, and I generated this piece just before the flyby. So we still didn't know what Pluto looked like up close. And would it be cratered? Would it be not? You can see my little various attempts at putting interesting features here. We knew Pluto was more salmon colored, warmer in color than Charon. We knew Pluto has an atmosphere. How geologically interesting would it be? How interesting would that atmosphere be? Would there be aurora? Would there be clouds? Would there be haze layers? Would there be geysers? Would there be albedo features? Deeply cratered, reworked? We didn't know. But this was my small role again in getting that stamp issued, which it finally did. Not with this artwork. This artwork was never intended to actually be the stamp. It was just to get the post office excited about it, and it was so fun to actually have the stamp finally issued. And with that, I think that was the journey I wanted to take you on, and really illustrating this role, this dual role that science and exploration and artwork play together, hand in hand, both inspiring the other and sort of trying to share with you the various artistic representations of Pluto as we've gone along before we ever got there, and having that world reimagined for us, and then having this lovely lesson that New Horizons sort of retaught us, that nature is always far more imaginative and exciting than we can possibly imagine, and showing us why it is we explore. We explore to be awed, and to go to these new horizons. And I'll end with inviting you to go and visit some of the artwork by these amazing artists of the International Association of Astronomical Artists. Go to www.IAAA.org. Check out the fantastic work of my colleagues. And if you're interested, join on. We'd love to have you. And with that, I'll hand it off to Amanda to take us back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can wave at you again. I can always start sharing again if somebody wants to go back and look at a particular piece, but I'm going to stop sharing and come back and join you live and go from there.
Thank you, Dan. That was really very interesting. And when you were speaking about, the handoff between art and science there, I was thinking back to some of the images of the moon's surface that were prepared, before the Apollo landings on the moon, that were done at Lowell Observatory as well. And it was, it happens a lot, and it's just art, informing and helping to bring science forward, and then that science then gets folded back in again. So yeah, absolutely, very, very cool.
Yeah, it's amazing to see it. It's amazing to see it when it actually happens, and to see it happen when it happens so right. When again, that I go back to that Don Dixon image from '79 that just captured Pluto so absolutely stunningly presciently. It's just crazy.
That really was amazing. When you showed that was I got little goosebumps. So I'm gonna just open up the floor to people. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it.
Yeah, please fire away, Frank. Or I'm sorry, Glenn. Yeah, that piece, the background sky in that image was completely hand painted in Photoshop. So it may have superficially looked like the Pleiades, but that was just hand painted in Photoshop by me.
Oh. Okay, well, sometimes you get the Pleiades then.
Well, I didn't want it to be a blank background black. It's just so boring, right? Basic black. Probably. So this brings up another case, and I run into this sometimes, as you mentioned during my introduction. I play a little bit of a role in the How the Universe Works show on TV. I show up on camera a bit, but I'm also one of the science consultants for the show, and one of my roles I try to play is helping them develop the scripts and sort of double check some of the CGI, the illustrations that they actually use for the show. And we're constantly walking that fine line between the accuracy of the imagery and the beauty of the imagery. There are many, many, many cases where you might want to argue that that's not scientifically accurate, Well, but you got to be careful, because sometimes, especially in astronomical work, if you make the piece of artwork absolutely scientifically accurate, it's just not pleasing at all. And so there are times where you shake off your artistic license and you allow yourself to have a little bit more of that freedom to bring in the heart and the romance and the imagination, because you're trying to also inspire at the same time. And so, there are times you would like to be a little bit more accurate, and there are many of our artists who strive for that kind of accuracy in the work. But there are also times where you want to allow for the heart and the romance to come in there as well. So sometimes it's good to not have those skies be pure black.
Right. We have a couple of questions here about your process, so this is good timing here. Cody asks, how often do you paint, and how long does it take to do one painting?
Oh gosh, well, that's a great question, because I have not actually traditionally painted in many, many years. In 2009, December of 2009, I sat in the theater, absolutely awestruck and literally speechless for about 5 minutes after my first viewing of Avatar. And what that movie did for me was, as a person who entered this field of astronomy because of my inspiration from Cosmos, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, I was all about all things exoplanets and life in the universe. And for so many years, I was so excited always about thinking about what those worlds might actually look. What would it be like to be there? And Avatar for me was the first time I had seen somebody photorealistically take me there and let me really feel what it was like to be there. And that was almost the end of my traditional painting career and the beginning of my digital art career. I walked out of the theater absolutely dedicated to buying every bit of software I could that was the software they were using to generate these kinds of vistas. And so nowadays, it's been mostly digital art, although every time I see my colleagues at one of our workshops still painting in plein air, I get the urge to want to go back to painting on a canvas again. The digital art takes, it could take days to even in some cases weeks to do, because you're still in many cases, it's not just the computer generating the art for you. Thank goodness not, because you want to see the hand of the artist in it. But it could still take a lot of time to research the science of it, research the views. You still want to get pleasing compositions. So what the digital media does for me is it allows me to generate some things in a little bit more hyper realistic way than I just don't have the talent to do myself in the more traditional ways. But yeah, hours, days, weeks, it depends on the image.
I think, sometimes these things are never done, right? But how do you stop yourself and decide,
exactly.
Okay, now it's done?
That's for sure. Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. When if you love it, you got to let it go, I guess.
Right. I'm going to go to a question from Glenn, and then I'm going to come back to a question from Art and Sharon. And Glenn says, as an artist, do you do a lot of actual telescope time observations as part of your research for these images, or or other scientific research, or are you working from other scientists' observations?
A little bit of both, and neither in some cases. I have to tell you, it's a little bit of a sort of a busman's holiday thing for me sometimes with the looking through telescopes. I see so much of that I don't get as much time at telescopes anymore as I used to, and as much as I would like to. But there's still nothing like putting your eye to the moon for real. I love doing that. A lot of my artwork focuses on exoplanets and imagining what the landscapes of those worlds might be like. And so strangely, it's even less than a lot of the inspiration just comes from being in beautiful vistas here on the Earth, just going exploring the Grand Canyon or traveling Iceland or you name it, going to New Zealand or other stunning places, and just because a lot of the geologic processes are going to be similar. A lot of the atmospheric things that we see are, there's the gases behave like gases no matter where you go. I mean, so a lot of my inspiration just comes from seeing stunning places here on the Earth. The biota of the worlds that I imagine, that does come from just complete, just what might something be like, coupling with this grounding of trying to keep it familiar enough that you at least feel like you're, I think a lot of the alien biotas that people imagine are probably not even alien enough. Again, hearkening back to nature being far more imaginative than we are. I see a lot of alien animal artwork that seems to be inspired by a lot of deep sea things, because a lot of deep sea creatures here on the Earth are some of the most alien things we ever, it's so much more alien than anything we see on the surface of the Earth. So that inspires a lot of alien, extraterrestrial life. But I wonder if even some of that is not alien enough. So that's the joy of that. But so the inspiration for me comes from just beautiful places here on this amazing miracle planet that we live on.
And that's really interesting, some of those things that you just brought up, because it ties into one of the questions from Art and Sharon, which says, what sort of images do you have in mind for the next 5 years depicting space exploration?
Yeah. It's we're in a golden, for me personally, we're in a golden age of exoplanet science. We're moving from now the mere detection of planets around other stars. Now we know they're there by the thousands. We know that practically every star has planets out there. It's almost become like, oh yeah, another exoplanet. That's, to me, is a miracle itself. I mean, just, two decades ago, it was like, oh my gosh, are they really out there? And now we're like, yeah, there's lots of exoplanets. And we're moving now from that miracle of a paradigm shift itself to beginning to study these worlds as worlds. We're detecting the light from these worlds. We're starting to understand, measure their atmospheres, what gases are in their atmospheres. And so we're beginning to actually go from knowing that, okay, there is a planet around this star, to being able to say that there is a planet 1.5 times the size of the Earth, and it has an atmosphere rich in water vapor and carbon monoxide. We're getting to that stage. And so for me, especially now with the stunning success of the deployment of the James Webb Space Telescope, we're going to be, and other telescopes out there doing similar jobs, looking for, terrestrial planets around other stars. I think a lot of, for me, it's going to be still imagining these worlds. What would I like us to be doing? I would like us to get back out to some of the giant planets, Neptune and Uranus, that we only, we've been going back to Jupiter and Saturn, and I love it. We're going to be going back to Titan with Dragonfly. We're going to be seeing the surface of that world. We got some a brief glimpse with the Huygens probe dropping down to the surface. Dragonfly is going to show us what Titan looks like. I would love to see I would love to see us get back to Uranus and Neptune. We saw how very, very much different the atmosphere of Neptune can be with time. I think we got a little bit we got a little gypped when we went to Uranus. It seems that we happened to see Uranus at a rather boring time. It turns out that perhaps the atmosphere of Uranus can be much more interesting at times. I'd love to go back there with a spacecraft and see it up close again and see if it changes.
Is there a planet you would like to visit yourself?
Oh goodness. Well,
besides,
yeah. Well, if I had, like anybody, right? If I had that chance to go to Mars and be part of a mission to go and do that, I would love it. But if the question were phrased slightly differently of what's your favorite planet, my favorite planet is always, of course, Earth. It's a rather crazy answer, but really, when you think about it in the context of the absolute miracle of biological evolution, and we're trying so hard to find the answer to that fundamental question, that ultimate question of, are we alone in the universe? And we imagine all of these other biota on other worlds, and we just have to sometimes step back and remember the miracle of this blue-green planet that we live on here. And I mean, I've traveled enough of it. I'm a big birding aficionado, and I mean, I've been to enough places on the planet to have experienced some pretty remarkable things. And it's a miracle of planet that we're on. So I like it here just fine.
Very good, very good. We have a couple of questions here about some specifics of how you do your art. Lana asks what software you're using currently, and then we have another question about asking you to tell us a little bit about the software that you're using and any special techniques that make it easier or provide you a special artistic effect.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can share a couple of those. So let me do the first one first, the digital side of things and the software. For the hardware art that I do, like for instance, I spent about 3.5 months building a very detailed 3D digital model of the New Horizons spacecraft. Down to every screw and spring. I had access to, but I didn't want to use any of the actual CAD, the actual blueprint designs, because there's ITAR restrictions and things. So I wanted to be careful about that. And so the way I did it carefully was I just looked at the same photos, the publicly released closeout photos, as we call them, of packaging up the spacecraft to get it ready to ship off to Pluto. And so I had access to looking at those images the same way anybody else did or could. And so what I saw, I modeled in a code called Modo. For me, that's what I use for 3D modeling. It's got a great user interface. For alien plants and landscapes, I use things like SpeedTree, XFrog. Right now, probably one of the best rendering software out there I'm learning to use, and I love it, is Unreal Engine. It's being used in the visual effects and gaming industry. And boy, talk about photoreal. So it's a matter of bringing in those 3D models into Unreal Engine and understanding how to get the lighting correct. You can use things like World Machine to generate landscapes. You can actually run erosion algorithms to get those valleys and things to look correct. ZBrush for doing 3D sculpting and modeling of organic features. Those are great. From the perspective of traditional art, I'd just give you one quick example that came to mind as I was listening to the question about special techniques. And this is not even one that, I'll mention two. They're not original to me. They were gifted to me very generously by Bill Hartman and Kim Poor, who are really, I think mostly responsible for getting me into this art field in the first place. Bill caught me once. I was doing a little pencil sketch of thinking about a composition I wanted to do. And I was drawing this tiny little postage stamp size little composition. And Bill caught me and said, absolutely, yes. This is exactly what you need to do. Because when you're drawing, having the initial concept for a piece, limiting yourself to a very tiny postage stamp size sketch of what you're thinking your composition is going to do really forces you to focus on the major elements of the composition and really get the pleasing nature that, the thirds rule and getting all those pieces to line up just right. A corollary part of that was another tip he suggested to me was take that little pencil sketch, and as you're doing your image, as you're putting your piece together, look at it in the mirror every now and then. Because if something is off in the mirror image, if the composition is it's going to show in the mirror image. Suddenly something will pop out as looking not quite right to you. That imbalance will really come out. So look at it in the mirror every now and then go back and rejigger it. And then I mentioned the very inky blacks of space, the thing a lot of us tend to sometimes avoid. But sometimes you do want to have the inky black of space. And Kim Poor taught me the secret that the best inky black is not pure black. You mix a little bit of purple, dioxazine purple into your black. And that just, for some reason, makes that blackness seem even deeper. So if you're doing traditional paintings in oil or acrylic, mix just a little hint of dioxazine purple into your black. It'll make it even blacker, ironically enough.
Wow, who would have thought? That's a great tip.
Yeah, let me mention a couple others. I mean, I have to go back because it just dawned on me a couple of the other things that we do. How do you get the randomness of a star field? Sometimes you want to paint the actual star field, but most of the time you just want to suggest a random star field. Human beings are horrible at trying to generate randomness, chaos in your image. If you try to start putting dots down by hand, you're just somehow your brain is going to generate a much more regular image than what nature really can do. And one of the best ways to generate truly random star fields is just to literally fleck paint off of your paintbrush at the canvas, and it just splatters down in a truly random nature, not just randomly spacing, but random distribution of the dots that represent the magnitudes of the stars, if you will. So humans are horrible at generating truly random patterns, and so splattering things down like that. And a corollary to that splatter effect is something we like to refer to in our community as Millerite. Our fellow artist Ron Miller, who is would generate these beautiful landscapes full of rocks and gravel, and his shortcut for generating the randomness of the rocks and gravel would be to splatter and fling the paintbrush at the canvas with the paint flecking off in the various directions and various colors of splatter. And Millerite is our term for this nice, natural looking, random, gravelly, sandy surfaces. So yeah, little simple tricks of the trade.
So how do you do paintbrush flecking on digitally?
While the beauty of some of these things is there are these procedurally generated landscapes now where you can, you tell it you're generating a power law distribution, an exponential distribution of smaller things and bigger things. And the computer is very good at generating fractal patterns that reproduce that same fractal roughness in rock that you see, the textures and so on. Unreal Engine is very, very good at this. It's a mix sometimes between procedurally generated terrains like this and actual photos, reference photos. You can go and take photos of gravel on a beach, and it's not just the photos of the gravel itself, it's the stereoscopic 3D representation that generates a little bump map for you of the gravel itself. And you combine that in the image in the computer to not only generate the color texture, but the shadow texture that comes from that bump as well. So sometimes it's a mixture of actual photo elements coming together with the computer itself generating these random things that gives you that the thing that nature does so well, this sort of random, stochastic, yet at the same time sometimes patterned and orderly phenomena. It's very good artists, which I don't count myself as, can do this traditionally and just paint beautiful rocky landscapes or vegetation and just capture it fantastically well. People with very good eye and a lot of talent. I resort to the crutch of digital, I think, to achieve those.
Great. Well, unfortunately we're running out of time. But this has been just a fascinating conversation. I do want to let everybody know that you are going to be doing a Star Stuff podcast with us. So if people want to hear more, they can tune in for that coming up in the future.
Indeed, looking forward to that.
Yeah. And then, so thank you once again for this just fascinating talk. I also want to just thank our sponsor for today's episode, Mother Road Brewing. Yes. So thank you all. And we hope to see you another day for another one of the Science Series talks.